We'll get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Cheryl Whitney Lauer from the Center for Careers and Internships. I'm the Associate Director for Internships and Early Engagement. And welcome to Making the Most of Your Internship. Middlebury students share lessons learned. So the idea behind this facilitated conversation is to help you prepare for your summer internship or job by hearing tips and advice from some of your peers who have gone before you and have agreed to share their observations and what they learned in their internships. You may not know the best way to be prepared for your internship before you get there, but hopefully there will be some nuggets here that you'll remember and that will come in handy when you first start your internship or if you hit an obstacle or challenge along the way. And the hope is that you will heed some of this advice and do things at the workplace that you might not otherwise have thought to do, to not only get the most out of this experience as you can, but also to bring real value to the organization you're working with. Whether this is your first internship or one of several you have participated in, I think you'll benefit from hearing others' experiences. CCI is thrilled to be co-sponsoring this panel discussion with Blueprint, the new residential life skills program at Middlebury. I'm also thrilled to have worked on this event with Nolan Shapiro, a current senior who is a peer career advisor at CCI. He has reviewed hundreds of resumes and cover letters this year and given out invaluable internship and job advice to students, all while keeping up with his own academic work, campus involvement, and job search. Nolan will be facilitating this conversation with our 5 panelists, all students who have participated in internships and have agreed to share their wisdom and lessons learned with all of you. Thank you to all of you panelists for agreeing to be here today and for joining this conversation. And to those of you here live today participating on Zoom or watching this later, thanks for joining us as well. Now I'm going to turn this over to Nolan, who will introduce the other panelists and get this conversation started. And we'll save time at the end for your questions as well. So over to you, Nolan.
Thanks, Cheryl. And thanks everybody for coming. As Cheryl mentioned, my name is Nolan. I'm a senior economics major, psychology minor, and I currently work at the CCI, help reviewing resumes and cover letters, interview prep, just giving general tips and skills with anything job related. And so today we have 5 panelists for you: Mara, Natalie, Benji, Audrey, and Samantha. And they each have had a diverse array of experiences, and they're all into different, they all have different interests. And so hopefully with them, you can see something related to you. And even if they're not related to your current path, skills are super transferable. Advice is super transferable. So we hope you get something out of this. So I'm just going to quickly ask each panelist to introduce themselves, give their name, their major, their year, as well as, some of your work experience, what industry you're typically work in, and with a specific internship, maybe one that you're going to talk about today, what are some projects or what are some skills that you had to do while on the job? So if Mara, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Mara. I'm a junior and I'm an international and global studies, Russian and Eastern Europe major. So I kind of dabble around in industries, but today mostly I'm going to talk about my experience working with the Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism over J-term. I was an intern for them for about a month, and I basically worked on an independent project the entire time, which it had its own challenges working remotely and also independently. But I was able to produce a report by the end of that internship on something that I chose, which was great about this. I was able to choose exactly what I was going to focus on, which was Russia and QAnon linguistics in Russian in particular, that's circulating on the internet and how that's still a problem that's overlooked. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Natalie, do you mind going next?
For sure. So I'm Natalie Tran, and I'm a sophomore majoring in political science and education studies. So just by my major, you can tell I'm really interested in government as well as education. But the internship that I'm going to talk mostly about today was one that I did during the summer after my first year, which was being an intern for an organization called Power in Place, which strives to focus on highlighting female politicians in government. And most of my internship entailed working on a time capsule initiative where we were trying to celebrate and highlight the centennial of women's suffrage and BIPOC leaders that are often overlooked throughout government. And I also had the opportunity to interview a mayor from Edmonston, Maryland, and just post her highlights on the Power in Place website.
Great. Benji, do you mind going next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Benji Renton. I'm a senior here at Middlebury, an international global studies major with a focus on East Asia. And most of my work experience is pretty related to my major, a lot of stuff in the China-focused field. After my sophomore year, I did a CCI-funded program doing research with rural education in China. But the internship that I'm going to be mostly talking about was what I did the summer after my junior year at the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, so government and sort of nonprofit focused.
Great, thank you, Benji. And Audrey, do you want to talk about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Audrey Kelly and I'm a senior. I'm a psych major with an art history minor, which is less relevant to my internship. But in the summer of 2020, I worked remotely for a company called Grit Digital Health. They're located in Denver, but I was working remotely from my home. So as it sounds like, it's a cross between the tech and health industries. So essentially, I worked under the content and brand ambassador, as well as under a clinical psychologist. And my main tasks and duties as an intern were to write content, which was then uploaded into the platforms that this company creates. So for example, one of the platforms is called You at College. And essentially they sell this platform to over like 130 colleges around the company or around the country, excuse me. And when a school uses this platform, each student has like information and a login to this platform. And so I was in charge of writing universal content for all access to schools. And then I also worked specifically with specific schools to do research on their mental health resources and the resources available to students. I also worked on a lot of the databases for the company, as well as did a lot of information for the marketing team as well to locate which specific schools would benefit most from Grit's various mental health platforms.
Great. And Samantha, do you want to finish this off?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, my name is Samantha. I'm a junior. I am a double major in computer science and Spanish. I guess the industry that I'm most focused on right now is the tech industry. The internship that I'm going to be focusing on this panel is going to be the one I did last summer. It was with Microsoft and Cyborg Mobile. I guess a general setting was more of like a educational and also implementational setting in terms of just understanding like some roles, specifically software engineering and product management, and then later implementing it into our own project that I worked on with a group of people.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to get into asking the panelists just different questions. If anybody has we're going to save time at the end for like your questions, but if anybody has something to ask about something that was just said, feel free to either raise your hand or write it in the chat, and we'll get to it. With that being said, I think we'll just start off, pre-internship. So Benji, I was curious to know, how did you prepare for your internship? You said that it obviously relates a lot to your major, but that's on like an educational front, maybe a knowledge front. Is there anything else you did to prepare, whether it be further research, whether it be networking with people inside the company? Just what did you do?
Yeah, I think going into it, obviously a lot of it was related to the coursework that I had studied. But I think for my internship, and I think a number of internships that people may be considering that focus on government, politics, really anything, the current events and sort of the situation can definitely change a lot. And so I think, in the weeks leading up to my internship, I was reading a lot about the US-China relationship. That was actually also one of our tasks as interns. I was an intern with about 4 other people that we were sort of responsible for circulating news to the other people at the organization. but I tried my best to sort of read up on the developments in the US-China relationship, and also really try to understand the organization. I didn't really network with anyone in the organization before being an intern. I think that's definitely an option, but I didn't do it. And so I really just tried to understand, what the size. I think the size, obviously, of the organization is a big difference. Whether this was more on the small side, I think there were maybe about 30 to 40 people total who worked in this organization. And so I tried to just learn about all the different types of programs, even if I didn't know which programs I would be working on, but I really wanted to see sort of the breadth of the internship or of the organization.
Great. And Audrey, you talked about how your internship was sort of a crossover between tech and health, and that you're a psychology major. So that is definitely some crossover, but the work itself didn't seem to be too psych related. It seemed to have a lot of other components in there. So I was wondering if you could talk about that experience in preparing for that.
Yeah, definitely. So the job was posted by a Middlebury alumni who was the clinical psychologist that I worked under. So prior to even applying to the job, I did reach out to him just to make sure that it was a good fit for myself, but also would be mutually beneficial for the company. Though a lot of the work that I did reflected a lot of the skills that I had advocated for myself on my resume, such as writing, was like one of the major skills that I said, I could really feel comfortable bringing to this company, and that is what they needed from an intern. So while and the content that I was writing was psych-based, so that's really where my academic background came in, and like skills from Middlebury. But I would also say reaching out prior was really beneficial, so that knowing myself, like going into the company and working with them, what skills I was also going to learn. So I did learn a lot more about tech and user experience and website design, which they fully knew that was going to be a new experience for me. So just making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page, yourself included, your boss included, about what skills you have and what skills that you're probably going to gain, will set yourself at ease, I think, entering into a new role.
I think you guys both make great points that it's really important to know what you're getting yourself into, both like skill wise and content wise. Like with Benji, even though he knew a lot about, Chinese politics and relations, like to know more about the current events, it's really important, whatever field you're going into. You should try to do whatever research you can before and during the industry. And what Audrey was saying about reaching out before, just getting a heads up of what you're really going to be doing during the internship, just will take away that shock factor, and you can prepare if you want to. And it's super, like you said, it makes you much more comfortable going into it. Moving on to the next question. You can practice all the skills you want and develop them beforehand, but you're going to learn a lot from your peers and supervisors. So I'm curious about what skills did you learn on the job and how you made the most of those educational opportunities. A lot of the times a supervisor knows you don't know how to code or how to write content for the first time effectively. And so they'll end up teaching you. So how do you make the most of those opportunities? Samantha, I was wondering if you could start with this. I know working like computer science technology, there's definitely a high, steep learning curve on that. So I was wondering if you could talk about your experience.
Yeah, of course. Well, like I had mentioned, it was definitely more on the, I guess like there was like an educational component to the internship itself, in the sense that we would learn at the beginning of the day, and then kind of implement whatever we learned into like the project that we were working on. And I think that was one of the biggest skills that I kind of picked up on, because I think we learn a lot in our classes, and a lot of the time we just don't have enough time to like implement it in like whether it's projects or like in essays. So I think putting everything to use one way or another was something that that I was able to kind of like manage. I think also the aspect of I think like networking, because like specific for me, like technology is such a huge like world. It's a huge like industry, and there's just so much that you can kind of go into when it comes to tech. And I think that Middlebury as a school is definitely like on the smaller side in terms of like the courses that they offer, the experiences that they offer. So with like the companies that I was working with, like they kind of like made like a point about networking and kind of using them as a resource to be able to network with professionals that were already in the industry, and kind of like just asking them about their specific roles and how exactly they got there. And I think I made the most of that in terms of like what I wanted to get out of the internship, in terms of like exploring more about a specific position that I want to pursue after Middlebury, and kind of like making sure that I take advantage of those like networking aspects to make sure that like I can kind of use them as a resource after I graduate.
Great. And Natalie, your internship, you said, was right after your first year. And, you know, we can all admit it, you don't really know much after your after only 1 year of college. So I'd be really interested on your perspective, jumping into sort of politics and a campaign for like commemorating women's suffrage, how you dealt with that learning curve and how you took advantage of the education.
Yeah, I definitely felt very intimidated by some of the older college students that I was working with. But my internship was very self-directed. And so I was able to learn from my peers and my supervisor how to manage my time wisely. And one of like the great things about having independent projects between all of us was that we all had something to learn from each other about, you know, what methods worked best and what didn't, especially because we were all doing this right as we had just gotten out of our half semester during a pandemic virtually. And being able to interview a politician was also a very new experience for me. I had, you know, never done an interview of a politician before, and I also never had the chance to like edit oral interviews before. And so I was able to learn from that experience how to be comfortable in my own skin, but also to enhance my own public speaking skills, because I know that I get very nervous beforehand, even in a classroom setting. So that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, you can definitely learn a lot from your peers, and both Samantha and Natalie talked about sort of taking an active role in your like education, like as much as you might be in a session for an education, or people might tell you what to do to further it yourself and take like an active role in what skills you develop. And then Mara, I was also curious about you, because you had an independent project, but also in a very niche area, and something that also sounds super cool, of counterterrorism. So I was wondering, you know, from writing a report, you know, you have to do the research, you have to probably interview a couple of people, you have to do the writing. How did you deal with learning all of this new professional, you know, aspects of writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely was tough for me at times. And I had a great supervisor who was the center head for CTech. And, you know, the thing about doing that kind of research is there's a whole different layer to it. He gave me a textbook about open source intelligence, because I was basically going online and gathering data. As far as actually producing the work, a lot of what went on was, even though it was an independent project, I would send my work back. We would send it back and forth between us. So he would make some changes, I would make some changes, and it just went back and forth like that. So we were kind of able to work off each other in that regard. As far as producing the final report, I actually decided to use R Markdown, which I had actually never done before. And that's one thing I will say, is that taking initiative in internships and just saying, you know, I want to learn to use this is always a great thing. So I was able to learn a new skill as I completed this project, which I think helped me stand out.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I always say, like, if you're, like you said, taking the initiative to something that you want to learn, that is one way to really stand out and set yourself apart, whether it's for an independent project or for a job, or trying to get like a return offer if you're a junior or something. Great, but so next, we're going to talk about something that we've all definitely felt before, and that's being out of your league. Whether, like I said, you're right after your first year when you don't really think you know much, to after your junior year when people think you know more than you actually do. I'm curious as to know how people dealt with feeling out of their league. Give an example of it and how you sort of got out of it. Audrey, do you mind going first on this one? Again, because it wasn't necessarily solely a psychology industry you were in.
Yeah, for sure. So when I began my internship, it was also obviously right when we were all adjusting to being at home in a pandemic, and there were also various social justice issues and equity battles happening that were arising in society. And so the content that they handed to me right off the bat was addressing really like racial inequality and how that affects like your mental psyche. And so I would say, and they said, they even told me this, they were like, we're really sorry that this is like your first experience of writing content for the company, because you're jumping right in. And so I think I felt very overwhelmed at first, but I would also say it was almost kind of like a good challenge to start off because I was given responsibility immediately. And so it felt like it was a good way for me to kind of test like what happens when I ask questions, like when I advocate for like, hey, like, how does this read? How does this look? It set a really good precedent for moving forward, because it showed that I cared about the content. I wanted it to look and sound and be accurate and helpful, and also showed them that I was really willing to take on the content that they were asking me to write. So I would say that turning challenges into a way to advocate for yourself as like a brand new intern and applying the skills that like you've advertised for yourself is definitely a good way to set the precedent for your internship, like for the weeks that follow.
Great, thank you. And Benji, I'm also curious for you, because, you know, as much as you learn about China in your classes and about how much you read in the news, there's a lot of information around China, and like even in one niche area, there's so much to do. So I was wondering if you ever felt sort of out of your league, you know, in a hole, and how you climbed out of it and how you, you know, excelled.
Yeah, I think there are two examples that I'll briefly touch on. I think there was a report that I was helping with, and it sort of had a lot to do with Chinese foreign direct investment and sort of other economic topics, which I have not studied that much and I didn't feel too confident on. And I think what was great about, you know, my interactions with my supervisor, as well as other colleagues that I was working with, that there was an option that, you know, if I didn't feel totally comfortable, maybe it would be a task that we could split up between myself and someone else. You know, for example, like my data analysis skills were potentially stronger than someone who I was working with, and that person may have had a better knowledge base of the Chinese economy. So that was what I did with one of them. And then I think another sort of roadblock that I had run into was there was this report that was written in Chinese, and my Chinese is good, but I didn't really have the skills to there was a couple of sort of translations that they needed. And I think the best sort of lesson that I took from it was just be honest and really, I think, push yourself definitely, but know that you have a limit. And if there's this, you know, if there's a skill that you're missing and it's sort of not really possible in that moment to learn, I think it's really important to just acknowledge that, you know, there are potentially other ways you can approach a problem or ask for help.
Yeah, I think you bring up two really good points. First, internships aren't like a net sum. Is like, if I succeed, somebody else doesn't, or if I don't succeed, somebody else does. Like, ask for help with your peers. You know how in class a professor will always say, ask 3 other students before you come to me with a question. Like, that applies to the real world also. And then also being honest, giving it a try is super important because it shows your initiative. But again, supervisors hope that you know things, but they don't expect that you know everything. And then Mara, when I asked the question, I saw that you had like a big expression. So I'm curious if there's a particular story that you have where you were just out of your league and how you overcame it.
Absolutely. So even though I was working on an independent project, there were actually a couple other interns working at the same time as me on their own projects. And one of the other interns was working on something with Russia as well. And one day he sent me a graph and he said, oh, by the way, like, I just want you to look at this data from Telegram. I have not been able to figure out for the longest time why there's a gap in the data. And then I found out that Russian servers were down for 6 months in 2017. And I was like, wow, I was not even thinking about that. Like, that's way beyond me. He has graphs. This is way too cool. What am I doing? But then I had to really refocus myself and think, okay, we're working on completely different projects on different things. I'm dealing with linguistics on Twitter, and he's looking at Telegram. I don't have to go that, analytical. And we had different focuses, and I'm sure both of our final projects were great, but it's very easy to compare yourself with other people that are working with you, especially if they're doing different things. And I think refocusing myself and realizing like, okay, this is not where my project needs to go in that direction, was a big learning moment for me.
Yeah, that's definitely super great advice of like before, not everything's end game. It's like focus on what you're doing, not necessarily what everybody else is. So on the same line of feeling out of your league, being a bit out of your league, what about mistakes? Because we all have made them before. We've all missed a deadline or met a deadline, but did the work wrong. We've all, maybe typed something wrong. So I'm curious about a time when you did make a mistake, what was it and how did you deal with it? And then more importantly, how you moved past it. Because, there's the classic idea that a mistake's just an opportunity to grow. Well, how did you actually grow? So Samantha, I was wondering if you could start us off.
Yeah, of course. I don't think this is like a super like big story, but I think it's like the idea of kind of like transitioning from like being in person to like being remote, and the idea of like kind of how I kind of had to like shift all of my like ideas about like interning once I went remote. And I think it was the idea that like I considered myself like a pretty good team player, but because we were remote, I feel like I had like the hardest time. And I think my mistake wasn't like reaching out like sooner about that. I felt like I kind of just said, you know what, like I'm gonna test the waters out, and then I'll see how like I can make I'll see how I can like adapt, and then we'll go off from there. But like the program that I was in made an effort to kind of like give us feedback every like 2 weeks regarding like our teamwork and like our own like work that we were doing on the project. And my first like feedback was like, oh, doing good job, but like needs to communicate more. And I felt like that was like a blow because like I felt like I'm always so attentive on the idea of like communicating with my teammates, always like being super verbal about what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, what we should do. And that was kind of like, it made me super sad because I was like, I know that this is like not how I am in person. But like moving forward, I kind of just like reached out to my supervisors and kind of like was, I guess, more verbal about like what like my experience was at the moment, and kind of like, I guess, be like putting it into existence in terms of like what I wanted to do to change it. And I think that really helped.
And did you get another feedback form and that wasn't a comment of no, it needs to communicate?
Yeah, it was better. I got a better feedback the next 2 weeks.
And Natalie, I was wondering if there's a time during your internship when you made a mistake or quote unquote failed, and how you got out of it and how you grew from it.
Yeah, so for my internship, especially for the time capsule initiative that I was working on, I was emailing a large number of female politicians, just trying to gauge their interest for working on the time capsule with us. And when I was doing my side project of interviewing another female politician, I reached out to the team of the mayor of Edmonston, Maryland, and I accidentally referred to her as the wrong person, just because I had so many names like in my head. And immediately I was super embarrassed. And, the best thing I could do in that moment was just to apologize. And, I'm not gonna lie, I was super embarrassed for like the next 2 or 3 days afterwards, but it was important for me to remember that I wasn't going to remember how embarrassed I felt, a few years down the road. And again, like, I don't feel embarrassed now thinking back on it. And if you too make a mistake, just remember to apologize and remember that everyone's going to make them.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I think you hit it like right on on the nails. Like everybody makes the mistakes, and like hiding a mistake is the worst thing you can do. Really want to own up to it. And like Samantha said, like explain how you can change or what needs to be done for you to be better, so you can move forward. Now, switching a bit from like your actual work to sort of the culture at a work, hopefully you like your coworkers and your supervisors. That's not always going to happen. So I'm curious as to whether anybody had an experience where they didn't get along with their coworker or supervisor, and how you sort of managed that. I hope maybe I'm going to open this up to the 5 panelists to see if somebody specifically has something to say. If not, I can say something, just because I don't want to call on you and it turns out you had a great relationship with everybody you worked up with.
I can pop in for this one, Nolan. When I was working on a team project for another project, I wasn't connecting with another individual I was working at another college, just because, you know, like we were just start a pandemic, we're all in the virtual world. And so I didn't feel very super connected, just because some of us had our cameras on, others off. And so I feel like when you don't have, you know, the picture of someone on the screen, a lot of things can just get lost, you know, like in translation, if you will. And so with that, it was just important for me to remember like how I view someone as an individual is very different than how I should view them as someone on my team. And so, you know, even if I just don't connect with someone, it's important to remember like an internship's not really about you or another person. It's kind of about the work that you produce together as a team. And so being able to like center communication and put that at the forefront with each other, to where you can, you know, at the very least, just produce the work that you want to make an impact on and make the change that you want. Like that's what's more important than, you know, whether or not if you get along with a supervisor or a peer.
Yeah, it's always sort of like the work, it should come before like your personal feelings towards somebody. I remember 2 summers ago, I was working with somebody who I didn't really get along with whatsoever, but we were assigned on 2 or 3 different projects together. And so even though we worked towards that end goal of finishing the project, when we worked together, it did not really go well. And so we had to change our working habits. So we divided our work and really just worked separately. And, you know, everybody always boasts about collaboration and teamwork, and that is totally the right thing to boast about. But there are certain instances where it might be better to work separately. And in my case, that was the best option. And we would come together, you know, at the end of the day, or whenever one of us was having trouble with something, or if we had a deadline and we needed to, you know, tease something out, then we would come together. But it's okay to, you know, sort of distance yourself from if it's going to cause problems for your actual work. So next, a lot of the time, internships or supervisors, you know, they might think you know a lot. Other times they might not trust you with a lot. And so you might not have a lot of work to do. Maybe sometimes you'll be super busy, but other times you'll feel like you have a big lull in the day or lull in the week. So I'm curious to know if anybody's ever felt that, you know, if you've ever felt underutilized or underappreciated, and how you did or how you would handle a situation like that. Audrey, I was wondering if you've ever experienced something like this, whether it be with your internship in Denver or even before.
Yeah, I guess I had a unique internship experience as I was the only intern with the company. It's a very small company where there's like 14 of us at the time, and every person really has their own role within the company. And even the intern, because it's such a small company, I felt like I, as a teammate, was really given a lot to do. But I would say if I had like extra time at the end of the day, I would offer that. But I really did luck out with my company. They had a really great culture around saying, you know, like if you finished your task, like you're done for the day. So I can't really complain about that experience very well. But I would also say open communication with like the closest coworker you have, or like for me, I worked really closely with 2 members. And so we would have a check-in meeting almost every morning saying, you know, these are the tasks for the day. This is what should be prioritized. This is least important, which in that helped me not only balance, you know, what I should be focusing on the most, but also plan out my day so that I had a good framework for if I was going to have too much on my plate or not enough. And so I would just say, like, keep communication open with your availability and what's being asked of you, as well as being honest with yourself about how long you anticipate jobs taking, which is obviously a learning curve. And especially in the beginning, I felt like I was overwhelmed with tasks because they were new skills. And then towards the end, as I became very competent in my ability to write content quickly and upload it within the website, that's when I felt like I was able to say, hey, like, I can take on more.
And that was actually going to be the next question, if you've ever felt like you had too much work. So that's really helpful, staying organized, open communication. And why don't we just combine those 2 questions now? Is there ever a time that you felt underutilized, or a time that you felt you had too much to do, and how you organized yourself? Benji, I'm wondering if either of those 2 ever happened to you and how you handled it.
Yeah, I think there were times, so my internship was about 10 or 12 weeks in the summer. And there were times, just depending on either the news cycle or upcoming programs, that, you know, I was preparing questions, for example, for one of their sort of lectures or talks, and then maybe next week there wouldn't be a program, and it was more sort of research work. I think the thing that helped me throughout all of that was really having a structure and a balance of things that I was doing on my own versus times that I was on Zoom meeting or working with other people, because my internship was obviously remote. And so I think having that balance of, I need to get things done for this meeting, or I need to, you know, have this hour that I'm working with people, but then also having time that I'm working on, you know, projects independently, I think just definitely tried to smooth out the weeks a little bit. And I think just as an extension of that, I sort of had this open communication with my supervisor and other people, my colleagues who I was working with, to just sort of ensure that if I had too much or not enough, there was the opportunity to tell them about that. And I think they were pretty nimble and versatile for that.
Great, thanks, Benji. And Mara, because you had an independent project, and it was only a month, which isn't too much time, really. How did you deal with all your deadlines for your report? Especially, you know, you said you used R and you didn't know how to use that before, so you got to learn that quickly as well.
Yeah, I would say for me, I just tried to really work on project management, which is a skill in itself. Just being able to divide the weeks into what I was doing. You know, I think I did like 2 weeks of research and then started compiling stuff. Well, actually, probably just a week of like background research on QAnon before I even got into actual research about Russia. But yeah, I would say project management, I tried to, and it's hard to do this when working remotely, I tried to stick to like normal work hours, because I'd find myself, you know, past dinner just trying to look up stuff. And I was like, no, I shouldn't be working now. Like, it's okay to take time off. The one thing I would say is that when you're learning something new, it takes a lot of extra time. And that's what I found too. So I kind of committed myself to doing this. And then I had to really teach myself through like YouTube videos and other things. And that definitely took a big chunk out of my workday. But I would say the actual project management helped a lot, because I knew what I was doing for the week. So if I had a little extra time, I could really work on other skills.
Great. And Samantha, I was wondering if you ever came across a time when you felt underutilized, and what you did to, you know, become rightfully utilized, or if there's a time when you ever felt you had too much work, and how you managed that.
Yeah, so for my internship last summer, I think I definitely felt overutilized. I think, I don't know if it was because of the fact that it was like remote, or I guess maybe like the structure of the program. I think that they definitely gave us like a lot to do. A lot of it, because it was like in an educational setting, a lot of it was definitely more of the sake of like putting what we learned into practice. But I think it was like kind of like my self ambition of like what I wanted to, I guess like I guess like how I wanted to make the most of the internship in a sense. So I think a lot of it was also self-pressure. But I think that the program was definitely structured in a way, at least for the sake of the final project, it was structured in a way where they definitely helped us like pace everything. Like Mara said, a lot of it asked for product management, kind of making sure that we were like allocating specific time to organize what we were going to do, the logistics of our project, and then start like coding like maybe 3 weeks before the program ended. So it was definitely a lot more structured for the sake of the project. But I feel like I feel like there was more like self pressure for myself to like kind of learn as much as I can. But I feel like overall they definitely did make the intention of trying to like space it out for us.
Great. And then why don't we just round it off with all five? Natalie, is there ever a time when you felt over or underutilized?
Yeah, so I believe I worked with around 60 other students from other colleges, so I definitely felt underutilized. Also given just how my internship was self-directed. And so, you know, if you're in that situation where you feel underutilized, I would advise you just not to be afraid to reach out to your peers or your supervisor to ask if they have or want any help on a certain project. Because, you know, the truth is that there is always learning to be done and work that needs to be accomplished. So just don't be afraid to reach out to ask if anyone else needs help with their work if you're done with yours.
Yeah, and besides, you know, helping them out with their work, everything you do is an educational opportunity for yourself, to learn a new skill, to strengthen an already existing skill, so that, you know, maybe next time they know that you can do something, so there is no doubt, so there's less downtime, and they'll offer to you. Or for next year, you can say, oh, I did this experience, so I'm comfortable doing that experience. And so really taking initiative, asking for, you know, additional work is a great way to, you know, switch from being underutilized to being appropriately utilized. And then, like everybody said, you know, talking to your supervisors and, you know, managing your time, like, you know, actually precisely instead of just winging it, can really help if you have too much work. So it can help you meet your deadlines and stay on task. I really like what Mara said about reminding herself what the work hours are, because besides giving yourself a break after dinner, it probably also helped you stay on track and be more efficient during the day, knowing that, oh, this is actually my cutoff time. That being said, there's a word that I think triggers a lot of people when it comes to internships, and that's networking. I know I hated it. It took a lot of time for me to get very good at it, but I hated it. I'm curious as to what other people's experiences were with networking. How did you make the most of your networking opportunities? Because they are super important. Audrey, do you mind starting off first? I know you said at the beginning of your internship, you networked with the Middlebury alumni, but what about within the company, or have you kept in contact with him afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the coolest parts of my job, I think, working with Grit Digital Health, was that because it's such a small team, you're really introduced to every aspect of the company. And one way that they do that for interns is they have you do this. So I had to reach out. They asked me to reach out to every member of the team and set up a phone call. And so I spoke with every member, from the CEO to COO to the engineers, designers, marketing team. And so by doing that and like having a sense of how they landed there, like their career trajectories, and how they ended up doing those jobs within a mental health company, was very interesting to me, just like thinking about my own career and like learning from their experiences and taking their advice, but also really great framework for myself working within the company understanding what each person does and how each person is contributing to the final product is really crucial to your own understanding within a company. So that was really awesome experience for me, because then once I also understood what each person did, when I did have a question, I knew who to go to. They knew who I was because we'd established a connection and like what I was doing and what I was familiar with, and also situated myself just in general with like the company's goals and motives. And then I would say another like really great thing I've taken away from the company is that by maintaining a relationship with the people I directly worked with, they've continued to reach out to me to do freelance work. So when they need extra hands on a project, they email me and they say, hey, like if you have any extra time, we'd love to like get you up to speed on this project and onboard you real quick, which has been really cool to like continue to have a relationship with the company in general, and also continue getting experiences and learning from them. And also my mentor, I consider the mid alumni who posted the job is also the VP of the company and the clinical psychologist. And having him, like having a working relationship with this person who does what I want to do has been more beneficial than I ever expected. In the sense where I can email him to ask him, hey, like, does this job seem right? I can call him on the phone and say, hey, like, I'm thinking about applying to these roles. Like, what do you think? So he wrote recommendation letters for me. He connected me with other people in the mental health and psychology field, and was a huge mentor in that. So I would say like really maintaining a work relationship, but also making note of which coworkers and which opportunities and like networking within the company are also personal, and that you like really like get along with. They're all relevant and they will be relevant when you leave the company.
Yeah, and I think what you said in the beginning with networking allowed you to know who to talk to when you had an issue or came across a problem is really key, something that I think a lot of people forget. People think networking is for the future, but you know, your example is perfect of it helps solve current problems. Samantha, I was wondering if you've had any experience with this. You know, you say that it's like an educational-esque program as well. So I'm sure there's networking built into that. So I'm wondering how you made the most of those opportunities or how you've utilized the network that you've created.
Yeah, definitely. So because we were under like Microsoft's corporation, we actually had access to like the whole directory. So they basically, this basically meant that we could like reach out to like any of the software engineers and any of the organizations within the company. So they really made a point of telling us like, you guys have access to this, like definitely reach out to people. Like if you find them on LinkedIn, like you can find them through the directory. You can send them, like we were big on Microsoft Teams, so we could send them like a quick text and say like, hey, I would appreciate some time if you have some, and kind of like being able to reach out in terms of like, for example, I'm into like cybersecurity. I reached out to people who were in those like positions. We were also given like mentors and coaches who were like software engineers and product managers. So they were also a huge part of that network in the sense that they said like, oh, I noticed that you're into this. I can connect you with somebody who's on my team, or I can connect you with one of my good friends that is in a specific organization, like people who were into gaming. So it was like, I guess like a huge like network in the sense that, you know, if you branched out, like you would benefit off of like your mentors' branches and like your coaches' branches, you know. And I think they really made a huge emphasis on the fact of networking, just because we were such a big group. We were giving like such great coaches and mentors. And I think that was kind of like you said, you know, we're in an educational aspect, and a lot of us were like freshmen or sophomores. And we're still like in the learning aspect where we're trying to figure out what we want to do. And they really wanted us to like take advantage of that resource so that we could kind of slowly get to a point where we're like acknowledging more and more what we are trying to like get into after college.
Great, thank you. And so I see we have about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one final question to the panelists. But in that meantime, if you have a question that you want to ask, why don't you write it in the chat? You can take, you know, a little time to think about it, and that way we can roll straight into it. So we've talked about, you know, preparation for your job, how you dealt with coworkers, how you dealt with too much work or too little work, how you dealt with networking. But so now, being a bit broader, I'm just, what lessons did you learn that you feel are valuable to pass on, things that you haven't talked about, but you wish you knew before going into the internship? Does anybody have anything specific that they want to talk about? If not, I have some stuff.
I can start,
Natalie,
Nolan.
go ahead.
Yeah. So especially just being right out of my first year, I think it was not something I thought about until it ended. And it's really important to remember, like, even if you're a first year or a junior, to know your story and know why it is that you really want to take on this internship, because it can definitely change the mindset that you have going into it throughout and then as you're getting out of it. Because it'll help you remember that you shouldn't be afraid to just make a space for yourself in the environment, and remember that, your voice and that your ideas matter. Take an active role in it, and don't be passive in it, and get out of it what you want out of it.
Great, thank you. Audrey, it seemed like you were going to say something also.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, a good reminder is that, like, remember, the more people that you know and the more people who witnessed your abilities in a work environment lead to the more advocates that you gain for yourself. So thinking about the paper trail you leave behind you from various work environments will really set you up for the future when you need recommendations or when you need people to advocate for you. Is something that was a really great thing that I benefited from, and I wasn't expecting to as much. And so just like keeping that reminder the whole time you're working for someone.
And Mara, I'm wondering if you have any perspective on this from like an independent, J-term project perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think my experience getting the project spans longer than just J-term. I had applied for work with this center for years, and every time it was, oh, like, we need someone that's fluent in Russian, or oh, we need someone that can code. So perseverance, first of all, like, I finally got the internship and was able to show my strengths by picking something that I was good at. But the other thing is just understanding that you're not going to know everything out there, and you're going to take on tasks that are scary and that you have to do independently. But just knowing that someone trusts you enough to have given you that opportunity and that responsibility. So I think going in with that sort of thought really helps you come out like very strongly on the other side.
And then Benji or Samantha, do you have any, final words of wisdom to offer?
Yeah, I think like the one thing that I sort of learned over the past summer that I did, and I think the other summers, is really try to branch out and try new things. I think we talked a lot about, different skills. If there's a skill, you learn a lot obviously here at Middlebury, but if there's some skill, maybe it's a software program or a research method that you're not going to learn here, I sort of see an internship as the perfect way to, be able to pick up that skill. And so I think there have been some, specific areas of Chinese, research, for example, that I was working on that I wouldn't have really learned in any of my other classes here. But just sort of being open to trying new things, I think was my biggest lesson.
And Samantha, it sounded like, yeah, you had something to say.
I mean, I definitely second everything that everybody else has said. I do want to mention like the idea of just like communication with supervisors. I feel like that's kind of like super essential in the sense that, like, they don't know what you need if you don't tell them. And I think that that's super important because, I feel like everybody has their own lives. Everybody's going through their own like issues, especially now since everybody's remote. So I guess like emphasis on like a remote internship. I think being super clear about like what you need, what you're expecting, and also asking the same from your supervisors can definitely help you get like a successful internship.
Thank you, everybody. Nobody wrote anything in the chat, but I'll give like one last shot if anybody has any questions.
I have just a quick question for Ms. Laura, but it's unrelated to the panel. So, I'm sorry, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
Do you want to ask that now or do you want to talk later?
Can we talk like just right after this?
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Are there any other questions? Well, I just want to thank you all of you panelists, for taking the time to talk about your experiences. I feel like there was a lot of wisdom that came out just about, communicating with supervisors and taking initiative and really taking the initiative to learn new skills. And if you're being asked to do something that you don't know how to do, your Middlebury students, you can figure it out in a lot of ways. And then if you can't, to ask questions. I feel like there was a lot that came up about networking and how that is just really valuable. And I really liked what you said about, it can be really valuable for being successful in the internship itself. It's not always, for the future. I have to tell people what I want or what I'm looking for. There was a lot about independent work and taking initiative and what to do if you don't have enough work. And, that's always, we have some great examples of what students have done in the past when they feel like they were being underutilized. There was one student one year who just offered to make an internship manual for the organization. That was something they didn't have. So you can think about, what are some skills that you bring to the organization that they might not have thought of. Sometimes you can, make your own suggestion, or, there was a lot of talk about independent projects. And if you really don't have enough to do, maybe you can suggest, can I do an independent research project, both so I can learn more about the field, and maybe that would be useful to you or to the organization. So I just felt like there was a lot of good information that came out. Appreciate all the varied experiences that all of you panelists had, and that you just brought a lot of learning. You also brought your Middlebury skills and knowledge to an organization. You were able to make an impact, and as some of you said, you could really kind of leave your mark and also be great ambassadors for Middlebury College too. So I just wanted to say thank you to Nolan for facilitating this. Thank you all for being a part of this. And CCI works during the summer. So those of you who are doing internships, if you need advice or want to talk to a CCI advisor before you start your internship, just to talk about how can you, start the ground, hit the ground running, or what can I do to prepare, or if you run into obstacles during the summer, we're around, we're available. We would love to be able to chat and talk you through anything. So any last words from anybody else? Thank you all for your time. Thank you for coming, and we are going to post this conversation on the website. So if anybody wants to watch it later, or you want to pass it on to your friends or family members, feel free to do that. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks, everybody.